Hello, and welcome to another Fantasy Premier League video. My name is Steve, and today we're taking a look at a week of pain. So we hit a red arrow this week, and it was a big one. The injury to Rashford that came up just before the deadline, so it was actually announced quite late after I had actually already made my transfers. But the injury to Rashford brought players like Trent, in some cases a Stupinan, and in other cases Luke Shaw, off of people's benches and into their playing 11, with those players scoring 13 points, 17 points, and 8 points respectively, when I actually owned neither of Stupinan or Trent. So on my wildcard in game week 31, I decided to go back to three premiums to bring in Harry Kane up. Well, actually to hold on to Harry Kane up front because he was already in my team. But that was going to be at the cost of players like Trent and Stupinan. I instead went for coverage from Kanate and Steele and net. But with the Rashford injury, I also had the choice of playing either Grealish or Kanate in my team. I did mention in the video last week that I thought Grealish was probably not going to start, but if any player was going to be able to get onto the pitch for the 90 minutes, I thought Grealish may have the opportunity to do so. Kanate is just not an attacking defender at all, so he is simply there just for clean sheet points. And I went for the upside in playing Grealish, hoping that he would either start or get at least 30 minutes off the bench, or if he didn't get the 30 minutes off the bench, I thought potentially he would just miss out altogether and I would probably get Kanate in anyway. But as it so happens, Pep decided to play Grealish for the last 12 minutes of the game, which earned him 1 point and blocked Kanate's clean sheet on the bench. And to make matters worse, Wilson, who is actually only owned by 15% of the game overall, but had an effective ownership of 68% at my rank, which is way higher than I thought it was going to be. He goes and gets 3 goals and an assist with maximum bonus in both matches to just completely obliterate my rank with the 24 points that he hauled over the double. So these were the main players that have decimated my score this week, that combined to make a safety score for my team at my rank. I needed to score 97 points for the game week in order to hold rank, and we have only managed to bring in 78 points. So consistent Kane is my big differential. He managed to score again this game week, making it 9 returns in the last 10 game weeks. So he is being incredibly consistent, but his 7 points weren't nearly enough to limit the damage. And thankfully, Bruno Fernandes, who I also don't have in my team, managed to stay relatively quiet. Otherwise, it could have been potentially a lot worse. So if you missed the video last week, I did have Solly March in my squad, and I think it was a 0.1 or either 0.1 or 0.2 million in the bank, which meant I could basically go nowhere from March without downgrading someone else. I decided to downgrade De Gea So I had the triple up of Manchester United of Rashford, Shaw and De Gea. I had 2 free transfers in the bank. I decided that I was probably going to want to look at bringing in Bruno Fernandes in game week 37 for his double. That meant that if I sold De Gea, I would have the 3rd Manchester United spot up for grabs. I could downgrade him to Forster, which I did, and then I upgraded Solly March to Matoma, who is, well, basically just a blocker. I think he has an effective ownership at my rank of about 95% or so. His overall ownership in the game is 29%, so the figures between overall ownership and effective ownership at various ranks is wildly different at the moment. But Matoma was 95% owned at my rank, only managed to score 5 points across the double game week. It was just, it was a rough week. So elsewhere, if I just read out my team for those of you without the visuals, I had Steele in net with 7 points. Trippier, who is obviously owned by most of the game, both 65% overall and very high at my rank as well, managed to come away with a couple of assists in the game this morning to pull in his first return in about 10 game weeks. So 10 points in the game against Brighton, 1 point for the game against Leeds for the other game of the double, 1-2-2-2, 1-2-2 for the running game weeks up until this point. It's great to see Trippier finally returning, but it absolutely makes no difference to my rank, apart from the fact that if I didn't have Trippier, things could have been a lot worse. I had Botman in defence for his double. Newcastle conceded in both matches. He only came away with 3 points. Luke Shaw was in my squad with his 8-pointer. I was actually quite happy to be having him in the team starting in my 11 given my team structure. But as I mentioned, the injury to Rashford meant that Luke Shaw basically came in off a lot of benches for players, meaning that 8 points didn't really earn me as much of a rank game as it could have. I've already talked about Grealish and his 1 point. We've got Salah in the team as well, who came away with 3 assists, which is not typical of Salah. He's usually the man that's either scoring goals or doing nothing. But 3 assists for his 12 points was good to see. Again, he is relatively highly owned, and so the 12 points doesn't gain me as much rank as I would have hoped. McAllister was probably one of my main differentials leading into the match, but the injury to March last week meant that McAllister's ownership went up for game week 36 as well. He only came away with 3 points. I've already talked about Matoma as my trade in. We had Isak in the team as well, who was my captain for the game week, who was really unfortunate in that first game. The second penalty for Wilson, Wilson took about 2 or 3 minutes before Wilson was subbed off. If that penalty had come like 2 or 3 minutes later, then you would almost guarantee that Isak would have been the man to step up and take that pen. As it so happens, obviously, Wilson was on the pitch, took the penalty, and was then subbed off. Haaland was 120% effective ownership at my rank with the solo game week, and so I'm quite happy to see that Isak at least matched his score so that Haaland didn't do any further damage to my rank. But it just goes to show that how many either dead teams are out there with just permanent captaincy of Haaland on, or how many managers are still backing Haaland even in the single game weeks as a single game weeker when there are double game weeks to play. And Harry Kane, who is basically the key to why I've got so many green arrows over the last 10 or so game weeks, but did not do enough this game week in order to secure me a green arrow. So we head into game week 37 with one free transfer. I now have 0.8 million in the bank to play with the downgrade of De Gea. And the trade that I was looking at last week before the injury to Rashford, but also before this knock to Trippier has also popped up in FPL, I was looking at going from Salah to Bruno Fernandes in order to jump on another double game weeker. But I am not at all sure of what I am going to do at this point in time. So this will be heavily dependent on team news, but let's assume that Rashford is fit and ready to start that match against Bournemouth, then I will probably seriously consider looking at a downgrade of Salah to Bruno Fernandes. Salah does have a great fixture at home to Aston Villa. It is a solo game week. Aston Villa have been doing relatively well. They've been a pretty strong team for a while now, but I think Liverpool will obviously have a very good shot at winning this game. Salah will also have a great shot at coming away with quite a high return here, but Bruno Fernandes nailed on for 90 minutes with the double. He's got the double against Bournemouth away and Chelsea at home, and then a great home fixture to, I think, Fulham. Yep, Fulham in the final game week of the season. So Salah's 2 game weeks versus Bruno Fernandes' 3 game weeks. 3 games in 2 game weeks. Looks like the obvious shout here. However, if Rashford is out, then I'm going to have to deal with him and hold on to Salah. I don't know if I'm necessarily going to look at taking a hit, and I am a little unsure of exactly where I might go if Rashford is in fact out. I do have a slot open for some sort of Man City midfielder. However, picking a Man City midfielder that's going to play both games is an absolute minefield. It's anyone's guess as to whether or not that's even going to happen. Pep could play his strongest 11 against Chelsea, secure the Premier League within that game, and then have mass rotation in that fixture against Brighton, as Man City still have 2 very key games to play, which is the FA Cup final and the Champions League final, in which they will be looking to hunt down and secure the treble. So my initial thoughts are I could take a bit of a punt on someone like a Gundogan for Rashford if Rashford is in fact injured. Gundogan would probably be quite a good differential. He has about as good of a shot of playing both games as anyone else. I think he is in the first choice 11, and for that fixture against Chelsea, Pep is most likely going to want to nail it down and secure the victory. Gundogan could play both games, potentially. I think I heard rumours that he's probably on the out for Man City at the moment, but considering that they've got that Champions League final and the FA Cup final, I don't know whether or not Pep would risk his first choice 11 in that second fixture away to Brighton. That will be a tough fixture. Brighton have been playing some very good football, and so, you know, he could go and put out his top 11, but I just do not know where I would go from there. I could also bench Rashford and play Isak, who is sitting on my bench for his fixture against Leicester, and maybe still just look at that transfer of Salah to Bruno Fernandes, which will give me a huge amount of money in the bank for some sort of game week 38 punt. But yeah, I suppose these are the transfers that I'm looking at. So Rashford to Gundogan, maybe even potentially taking some sort of hit and looking at bringing in someone like Trent Alexander-Arnold for Trippier if Trippier is in fact injured. I don't think I would go and double up on the United defence. Any sort of defender at United is a little bit hard to pick. These are not great defensive fixtures in terms of a clean sheet, and I cannot really put my finger on another Manchester United defender that has good attacking threat. And Trent Alexander-Arnold playing in his inverted midfield role has seen him just do wonders since he started that position, and I think it was approximately game week 30, which was actually the game week before I wildcarded. But since game week 30, when he has jumped into this inverted midfield role where they go to 3 at the back and Trent goes into midfield sitting next to Fabinho, Trent's scored 5 points, 9 points, 5, 5, 4, 7, 7, and 13. His expected goal involvement is very high for a defender, and they have been picking up the odd clean sheet here and there, with 3 clean sheets on the bounce against Leicester, Brentford, and Fulham. And their final 2 fixtures are pretty good on paper: Aston Villa at home and then relegated Southampton away. But to go from Trippier up to a Trent Alexander-Arnold is 2 million difference. So this is why I had to make some considered downgrades on my wildcard in order to fit in Harry Kane. And the sacrifice that I did decide to go with was a Trent Alexander-Arnold. I do not know if I could get him back. I could completely switch formation potentially and just get rid of the Rashford spot, completely downgrade him and go up from Trippier to a Trent Alexander-Arnold. But that would be quite a committal move. Trent's only got 2 single game weeks. There are some good double game week options out there, and potentially I just go for a punt and hope to get lucky. The damage is already done for my rank as well, and so whether I finish 300k, 400k, or 500k, I don't think is going to make a hell of a lot of difference. It's been an awful season. I just want it in the bin and start afresh again next year, but yeah, it's been rough. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure where I'm going to land yet. It's heavily dependent on team news, which will be coming out tomorrow. I'll make some decisions then, and then just soldier on through the last 2 game weeks of the season. So that's it for today's video. If you have made it this far through the video, please do consider giving it a like, and if you are new around here, hit that big red subscribe button and the bell icon to be notified about future FPL content coming your way. And until next time, I'll catch you again shortly. Cheers.